So we will start talking about CSS. So this exercise is a pain in the butt because it's not really how you would write CSS, but it's looking for such a specific answer that the test the person wrote that it's like, it's a pain. So if you go to the CSS unit, we can go and we have access to all of these resources. You can go ahead and read more about HTML, CSS. We'll go ahead and not do that for now. So let's scroll on down. We have a typical HTML document. This person decided not to put as much in the head as our boilerplate does. That's fine. I like our boilerplate because it shows us all of the different things that we could import if we wanted to. So this is a totally acceptable head tag. That's because this is a super basic HTML project, right? So just because you don't see a lot going on in the head here doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. Just understand that head tags are meant for literally data that doesn't necessarily pertain to like what the rest of the documentation is going to look like. So again, talking about style tags, this is CSS. Same exact thing. Again, this kind of gets verbose. I'm not going to read all this, but I'm sure they're illustrating the point of like this is kind of a pain in the ass to read. Now that the code has been duplicated, you can separate it out like this. Don't do that. Short story. Here we go. This is what we want, right? So we have a link tag with a relation of style sheet. We've all seen this in our boilerplate. The type is going to be text of CSS, and the hyperlink reference is going to correlate with just our local directory right now. In this case, it's a file right next to this HTML document called style CSS. And so in here, we can simply say every single div should have a width of 200 pixels, a height of 200 pixels, and a background color of red. This is some functionality that you can do in CSS that would be a pain in the ass to do in HTML because then you have to do this, where you're specifically saying to each div tag, like, this is the way you should look. Div tag, this is the way you should look, right? Like, it's redundant, it's a waste of time. It's much easier to just say, okay, we know this is a div. If we have a CSS element, we could just say every single div should look this way. That's significantly easier than every div you create, you have to copy and paste this line. Because these are the same things. Again, this style attribute is CSS. Width, height, background color. Width, height, background color. But in order for this to work in HTML, you have to apply this to every individual element. So that's why it's like, I really don't want to keep copying and pasting the same style attribute on every single div. You can just erase that, and you can just declare it as a div. I don't know what they're trying to show here. This is like weird. Don't do this. All you need is a div. This could just be a div tag. And then down here, you simply just say div, width of 200 pixels, height, blah, 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 blah. You could even give it a class of red. So here we see the period again, the dot. This means that it's a class of red. So if I say this is a div, but it's a class of red, then this CSS would operate on that individual div because I gave it that class. This, on the other hand, would just take every single div and operate this CSS functionality on top of that div. So I think we had a class attribute, blah, blah, blah. Now the first div should be red. Even though the styling for red comes before the styling for div, targeting a class is more specific. The next level of specificity is an ID. Okay, so I'm not sure if this would work, and I'm actually just going to copy and paste this. So let's get in our example. So down here, it's kind of hard to see. Where am I? Print working directory. I'm in HTML example. So HTML example. Let's close out all this other stuff. Cool. So actually, ls, I'm going to cd, I have caps on, cd, and I'm going to type in code example. Now this will open a new window that is only focusing on this directory. So if we look on the left here, I have all of these different files. I'm personally starting to lose track of where everything is. It's starting to become really hard. So if I type in code, the name of this file, this is a, sorry, not a file, this is a folder. So if we type in code and then the name of the folder, boom, all of a sudden I have 2 VS Codes open. But if we look at the left, I don't have to deal with all this additional BS on the left, right? I'm only dealing with this specific folder. So if you're starting to run into trouble where you're like, dude, I'm starting to lose track of what I created over here because it happens to me, then you can simply just call this code command and bash on the folder, and it will open a new instance of code that is based only on that folder. So we can go ahead and close this. Now we have our new Visual Studio Code. I can double click on example, HTML, bring in the boilerplate. We can erase all of this, save. These are all empty. Pump this up. So I am going to do div, and then I'm also going to have another div, but this one will be class equals red. Close that off, save that. So now I don't have a reference to my style sheet because I haven't wired this up. So right here, if you look at my breakdown, the way that my example folder works is I have this HTML file on the base of my directory, and then I also have a file for JavaScript and a file for CSS. So you don't need to do this if you want. If you want, you could have all of these files on the same level. Are you sure you want to move it? Yep. See, so now they're on the same level. Like, that's totally fine if you want to do that. Totally fine. The only thing that changes is the way you would href that thing. So in this instance, I want to href my CSS file. So if I come in my style sheet relation and I just type in /, my IDE is smart enough to know that I'm trying to go into my directory and find some sort of file or folder. So yes, I'm looking for CSS, and yes, I'm looking for example. There we go. So I'll save that. Now I already have 2 divs. One has the class of red. Let's go ahead and paste in that CSS from that example. Now I have red here because my IDE with the indent colorization extension isn't liking the way this is indented. If this bothers you, you can go ahead and beautify it. At the end of the day, it's going to function the same way. So again, I am going to go ahead and run the Apple specific command of open. I think it was start for Windows, and we can go ahead and see that we do actually have 2 divs. So the red class takes precedent over the just vanilla div selector. So if you forgot what I did, I pasted this in from the example we were looking at on Galvanize. And I said for every single element, so this isn't specific to divs, to clarify. This could be any element. You see how that tooltip popped up? It says element with the class of red. So this could be a span, this could be an image, this could be anything. As long as I've designated in my HTML file that this has that class, this CSS will operate on that as if there was a style tag here saying the same thing. Style, height, right? My IDE knows what I'm talking about because this is CSS, but we don't want to do this because we would have to go through each and every single element and write this out every single time, right? That's kind of cumbersome and it's a waste of our time. So if I could just call this the class of red and come to example, then I call that with .red because it's a class. If it was an ID, I would need a hashtag. So to exemplify that, I'll change that to ID, save, come back. Now, actually, I'll show you with it broken, right? It doesn't work because I changed it from a class to an ID. But now, if I erase that period because it's no longer a class, it is an ID, add an hashtag save, we're back. So those are literally the 2 ways you are going to be selecting things in CSS. Dots and hashtags. What's the difference? Up to you. Is it an ID or is it a class? You write these. I really don't care what is here because it's, oh, you don't want another one. It's up to you what it is called. Copy, save. Now this is a class, a horribly named class. We can go ahead and erase this ID. Now, refresh, refresh, refresh. It still works. Because I gave it this stupid class name that's extraordinarily long, it doesn't matter as long as in my CSS file I reference the class with a period. So I want to drive that home, like style tags are CSS. It's just when you don't want to write the style tag for every single element every single time. So you just call it like, hey, this class should be green, right? Green. So the background color should be green. Wow. So crazy. So let's do the same thing. Actually, you know what? I want this to have a class of green. That took way less time than if I was to write a style equals height 100, width 200, background color green, right? All I need to do is just say, I want this class to be green. It's super, super easy. Okay, I don't want it to be green, I want it to be blue.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Remember you sent out that HTML5 tag cheat sheet?
Yeah.
Is there something like that for terminal commands as well?
I kind of brought that up yesterday. I kind of found it to be a little weird, so I didn't want to share it. So if I type in like bash cheat sheet,
Because I just searched for VSC terminal commands.
maybe this would be appropriate. So you can actually write if statements in bash. So this is a lot. You can write a for loop in bash.
I'm just walking around.
Yeah. So this is bash. Like it has a lot of functionality. If we're looking for something like touch, command, arithmetic.
All that stuff.
I just know that because like those are the most common commands. I pulled up a bash commands thing yesterday, and I found it. So you see this little check mark that means I've been there before. I think this is the one I was on yesterday. Yeah. So I was trying to use this to be like, what does touch mean? Because I was using touch.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, right. And then when I scroll down to touch, it said something weird like it changes the file's timestamp. So at a computer level, I think that makes sense. I think that, you know, machine code, it's like, okay, if this file doesn't have a timestamp, then I'm going to create the file and then give it a timestamp. That's probably what it's actually doing. But when you're just looking at this right here, it's like you would never know to use touch to create a file because of the way that this is written. This is just something that I just know from doing it so much. Maybe we could type in how to create file with bash. How to create a file in Linux. Again, Linux uses bash. As long as it's bash related, you're fine. So grep is Linux specific. That is not what we're looking for. Oh, touch, actually, yeah, right there. So use touch for an empty file, right there. That might be the way to go about this instead of maybe looking at that weird long, whoops, that is not what I wanted. Instead of this long list where it's like, technically this is probably correct at the machine code level, it changes the file's timestamps, but I'm almost sure that there is some sort of catch where it's like, if this file doesn't exist, create the file and then add the timestamp. You know what I'm saying? If the first file would be a valid argument and no timestamp is given, that argument is interpreted as the time for other files. Any file that does not exist is created as empty. So that would take a little bit of reading on this method, but it's not immediately apparent. So like, I can go ahead and share this with you guys. Oh, I copied the wrong one. Let's go back. This one. But just, I'm not sure how much your mileage is going to. Your mileage is definitely going to vary on that one. So there's as close to a cheat sheet, I guess, as you can get. But like really the commands you need to know are cd, ls, pwd, touch. If you want to have some fun, you can do echo. It's literally just a console log. So, I mean, yeah, that's what echo does. What are some other good ones? Make directory. This makes a folder, not a file. Makes a directory. So, empty directory, ls. So now we have this file extension. So we know that this is a file, but then we can see that these are all directories because there isn't any file extension at the end. So if I try to cd into example.html, it says it's not a directory because there's a file extension there. But if I cd into JS and I type in ls, we see this file extension, right? So that's kind of that's how you tell if it's a file or a directory. It will always have that file extension there. Typically in your Finder or your File Explorer, it actually should say the file extension as well, like here .mov, that's the file extension. Sometimes it's hidden, and you would need to go into your Explorer settings to actually have it show the file extension. Off the top of my head, I don't remember how to do that on Windows, but I'm positive how to show file extensions. Windows. How to make file, I mean, you have a ton of great resources here, right? So like, if you're having that problem, you can go ahead and Google how to just show the file extensions. But for all intents and purposes, if you're using Bash, this is how Bash is going to work. It's always just going to show you the file extension anyway. If you're on Windows and you don't see the file extension in your File Explorer, that's why. It's because Windows, by default, for whatever reason, tends to try and hide the extensions. So just keep that in mind. But we don't need to worry about that because this is Bash. So again, change directory, ... that means go up a level. So in Linux, Francisco probably has access to this in his File Explorer. There's a button kind of to the left over here that's an up arrow, and all you do is you click on that on Linux, and it just moves you up. So as if I was encoding, if there was that button right here on Linux, I could just click that, and it would bring me back to Documents. Linux is great. I love Linux. So that's what that's doing. Like, if you could pretend in your head that that button was there on your File Explorer, that's all this ... means. It's like, if you could pretend you were hitting that button, if I clicked on that button, the computer goes, oh, that's cd ... right? If I click on, if I'm here, if I'm in Documents, and I click on Coding, that would be cd ... /coding. So we're not going up, we're going down. As a matter of fact, I don't think we need this dot. It's good practice to have the dot because the ./ means this is explicitly your current directory, but sometimes like the terminal is smart enough to know that you're already in your directory, so you can just kind of just throw coding in there. But let's take a look at what our actual directories are. Shoot. I just changed my, okay, so cd documents, right? So I don't need the ./ here. So I'll go to my documents, cd galvanize, cd, oh, I should do it again. Documents, you can also do this, galvanize /HTML. There we go, I'm back. So, cd CSS tab. You don't need the ./ I would consider it best practice because it's explicitly known what you're trying to do. Just know that it's not always needed. and I can go ahead and hit enter, and I arrive at my CSS directory. Yeah, so the most important commands that you guys need to know are cd, change directory, if you want to move throughout your terminal. ls, list selections, is great. I almost always do this. You may have noticed this, like the moment I hit where I'm at, I hit ls just so I know what my possible options are. So cd, list selections, make directory. This creates an empty directory. I did that to create this empty directory. We also have touch. This creates an empty file. And the cool thing about touch is when you use touch, you can actually explicitly say what file type it should be. So I could say this should be a text.text. Now when I type in ls, I can do code text. I'll hit tab, it automatically completes. We have a text file. That's why we have these extensions, is because it's not necessarily like for you to understand, it's literally for the computer to understand, like what is this data type and how should I treat it. This is just a plain text file, so it's just a plain text file, right? I can sit here and just, I haven't shown you guys this one a lot, you probably won't use this one a lot, but a cool little thing is if you type in MV, this does two things. You can either cut your file, your folder, and move it, so MV move, but you can also like literally use it to rename things. So I'll type in MV text.text, and I'll type in text.js. So my text.text was deleted, but I'll keep this up as a reference, and I'll double click this JS. Now when I start typing, all of a sudden it's treating it as a JavaScript file, right? That's why these file extensions are important, because it's not literally like for you to remember, it's literally the way the computer is going to enter into that program and treat that environment, especially with our IDE. So with JavaScript, we can do like console.log, everything's changing colors, this is cool, right? But if I was to copy this into my text file, it's just text, right? So that's the differentiation between these dot, JS, dot text. They're all text at the end of the day. But the way your computer is going to treat them is based upon whatever that file extension is trailing after whatever you call that file. So that's why that's so important. That's why that you maybe want to go ahead and go on Windows and make it so that you can see your file extensions in your Finder. Mac, I think by default, just so happens to include your file extensions. So if I go in here, I have my .md, that's a markdown. JSON, JavaScript object notation. This is a shell, so a bash shell script. Go in here, JavaScript, 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 right? I know that just by looking at that, by the the file extension. So we've gone over touch for making just a normal empty file. We've gone over cd, ls, pwd is good for like if you're totally lost and you're like, how the hell did I get here? If I typed in cd ... so now we're in HTML, /... now we're in Galvanize, ... / now we're in documents. See? We can see that right here, documents, because for every ... we go up one level. And I called this from example. So if I'm in example, and I do ... now I'm in HTML. Then I do ... now I'm in Galvanize. Finally, ... now I'm in documents. Now when I hit enter, I'm in documents. So that's how that like ... thing works, is it's literally just going up a level as if you had access to that magical Linux button that you could just click on the left right here, where it would just literally, you just click it and you go up a level. That's all it's doing, is like if I was in documents library, I could click ... and it would just bring me back to the main parent directory. ls, that's really all you guys got to worry about mostly for the terminal for now. Just change directory, list selections, touch to create a file, mkdir to make a directory, mv if you're feeling fancy, you can go ahead and change file names, or you can actually cut and paste files into different places. So I will go ahead. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. cd galv cd html. If I wanted to go ahead and move this example.html to dot example, now I'll type in ls again. I'm in the same place. All I did was I was in HTML. I typed in list selections. I ran this move command, and I said take this example.html and move it to this directory. Now I type in ls, and it's gone because I moved it. So again, I want to hone this point home. Like MV can actually be used for two different things. You can actually like rename a file with it, and you can actually like literally move files to where you want them to be. So now when I change my directory to example, we'll see that, what did I move? Example HTML is right here. I'm trying to think of other ones, but that's really like ls, touch, mkdir. Yeah, those are like really all you need to know. Just like how to get around in the terminal, right? Like at the end of the day, that's all you really need to know, right? At this point, you don't need to know how to write for loops in the bash terminal. You guys aren't going to be doing that. I don't do that. So like as long as you can get around in the terminal, you guys are fine. So yeah, and then again, file extensions are only important to the computer. It's not really for you to. It's not for you. It's literally for the computer to be like, oh, this is an HTML file. I'm going to treat this as an HTML file. But at the end of the day, it's literally just text. And I can go ahead and come over and show you, again, if I wanted to just come over here, txt. Oh, so text2. Now all of a sudden my IDE is like, this is just a text file. CSS. This is a CSS file. Hey, dummy, you have an error here. This isn't how you write CSS. Rename. Let's do a JavaScript framework. View. This is not how you write Vue. So I think it's like what the heck are you doing right here? But like again, this isn't changing our data. It's just changing the way the computer operates on this data. Node text2.js. Oh, I didn't save it. This is cool. Any questions? We're kind of heading towards the end here. Just want to make sure, like, if you guys have any pressing issues, things about CSS that are kind of confusing to you, we can touch up on those while you guys are here. Feel free to just shout out whenever. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, like that's CSS. You just kind of declare what you want to be a red thing, declare what you want to be a green thing, and you're set to go. One thing that you might overlook is all of these different references, but some of these are actually pretty good. So if we go to like a wireframe mockup, we can see like how maybe we would want to like practice creating an HTML page that has like a div with an image inside of it that's pushed to the left, so on and so forth. If we wanted to learn about CSS floats, if we wanted to learn how to flip cards, using a starter HTML, CSS do the following. Add these classes to the elements so they're right on top of each other using opacity and CSS. That's also another CSS element. If I come over here, whoops, opacity, I could do 50%. Oh, I already put that in there. Do I still have my, oh, I do. Did I erase it? Oh. What did I do? Nope. Hello? Oh, man. CD. I created so many files, I forget what I was working with. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
After, have you run into like you're importing a Google font, it looks great in your test environment, and then you actually load it to the host, and then it's all weird. That's what's happening.
Mm.
And the weird thing is if I inspect it, it has like extra like garbage characters in front.
That's because your browser's not able to unencode the font that it was encoded with. So is what you're doing is you're importing like Google Fonts up here in the head, and then you're loading it in your browser. It might be that your browser just doesn't accept that font, and so it's kind of like garbling it up. It's a bunch of boxes and question marks and stuff like that, right?
Weird. Great. And the test environment. Like so many. Sure, I'm not the first person.
Yeah. The thing is, font CDN. So it's probably something Roboto or whatever. But if we scroll down, we should get this. I typed in CDN. Hopefully the CDN is here.
If you click on select this font, you right.
Okay.
And then you can expand that little bottom thing.
So yeah, so this is a CDN. This is a content delivery network. And so down here, it also, did you specify it in your CSS?
Yeah, so I added the CDN in the head, and then in my style sheet, I targeted that specific thing that might exist.
So this is how you add a CDN, like no joke. I wonder if you need to target the I don't think we have blue anymore. HTML, just like the whole HTML. Alt, I'm holding Alt, hit up arrow, bring it in, save. Example. I think I closed it. Open example. I didn't type anything. Am I looking at the right one? Code. Yeah, okay. Where is that bracket coming from? Okay. So you can see that didn't error out. If you were going to try and import a font family, I would try to use a CSS selector that calls it on HTML, because that's literally going to select the entire document. I don't know if this actually worked, because I don't know off the top of my head what Roboto looks like. Yeah, but that's pretty much like you got it down. That's how you would do it. If it's not working on your browser, then I have to imagine it's either you're trying to import a font that your browser doesn't support, or the way that it is being imported is like not gelling with your CDN, your HTML file. It's kind of hard to tell. Usually what I see is like a ton of different Google fonts all stacked on top of each other. So it's like if the first one fails, then it'll default to the next one, and then if that one doesn't work, then it defaults to the next one. I see that a lot. I forget specifically where. It's going to be hard to pull that up in just a couple minutes, but I'll actually slack myself that. I will look into CNNs, or CDNs rather. And since we have class tomorrow, I'll make sure I touch up on that in like all the fonts. Because I think I have an idea of what's going on, but like to dive into that while I'm recording and stuff like that, I just don't want to waste people's time. But you're close. I think it just has to do with something with like the browser not liking the encoding. It could be also like up here. Maybe the char set is actually a different encoding. I'm not sure without like diving deep into it right now. Also, right here we have content, i.e. edge. We actually don't need that, so maybe you still have that, and it's trying to load it as if it was internet edge. Stuff like that, which at the end of the day, honestly, shouldn't change it because they both run on the same Chromium engine, but it didn't change it for me. I don't know if that's Is this Roberto? Roboto? What is it? Roboto? I don't know. It doesn't seem to be changing my font, so I'm guessing it's not necessarily working on mine either. So I wrote that down. I'll make sure I look into that tomorrow for you. But it's 8:30. Is there anything else before we conclude for the night that you guys want to talk about? Cool. So tomorrow, what I want to work on is just writing down our projects, and then we'll have like some user stories, kind of like how we talked about, where like the user will come to my page, and when they visit my page, they can click on this thing and they can interact with it, and then it does this. That we'll have like maybe 3 user stories, very very generic, basic user stories, and then coming in next week, those guys over there, those are my students. Those guys will be here to help you guys with writing your HTML and stuff like that, and it'll be a lot more effective. And instead of just me, it'll be multiple people helping you guys out.